Hello everybody and welcome to 2023, where the days are short, the weather is cold, and I think it is prime PC gaming time. But if you're in the situation where you're looking to either upgrade your PC or buy a new one from scratch, then don't worry, because in this video we've got you covered. We're going to be building 3 epic rigs at 3 different price points to help you to find the very best components you can for the money, as well as to give you an idea on rough compatibility, to show you the sort of things you can actually get for a set budget, and of course show you what sort of things I like, and we'll be talking about different components that I've used and ultimately ones I'd recommend. So let's get started, or at least we will after a short word from this video sponsor. Elgato's Stream Deck Plus is here, and it takes your gaming setup to a whole new level. Control lights, volume, color balance, stream settings, and a whole lot more, with 8 programmable LCD buttons, 4 clickable dials, and even an LCD touch bar. It can be as simple as a swap between headset and speakers, or controlling an entire streaming setup with just a single press. Learn more today with the link down below. So yes, here we have our 3 blank builds, our budget build, mid-range, and then our high-end beast. And we're going to kick off with our budget one. I think today we will start our shopping journey with eBuyer here in the UK. And I'm interested to check out a brand new CPU from Intel, the 13100. Here it is, £150, which for me is actually a little bit more than it should be. I think this is just because it's a brand new processor. I think the previous one was around about £50 less, so let's have a look at that. Now don't get too excited about these chips, because while they're definitely very affordable, they've not got the best performance in the world. They're actually only quad core, which in 2023 now definitely isn't that impressive. However, what I want to do with this whole thing is to get you something that you can actually afford to buy now, but then something that is very upgradable later. So if you want to turn this into like a super powerful rig and, I don't know, even put in like a RTX 3080 or something like that, then you still can do that with an upgrade path. So what we're going to use here today, I think, is this 12100F, because there's no way that the latest 13th gen is worth almost, what's that, 50% more? It's definitely not. This is something I think is going to be a bit of a temporary thing, though you probably upgrade with like a 13th gen CPU a little bit later. So we'll add this to our basket. And definitely don't get me wrong, in terms of performance, this is going to be absolutely fine for the graphics card we're going to go for. So don't go thinking that you have to spend more, because while obviously you'll get more performance in certain scenarios, if you're pairing this with a very budget-friendly GPU, the two of them should work in tandem very nicely indeed. So let's actually see what we can get in terms of GPUs. I mean, can we go for an RTX 3050? They're still quite expensive, but they're coming down a bit, aren't they? Around about £270. Compared to a few years ago when you could get like a 1050 Ti for like, what, £140? Obviously this does seem pretty steep, but actually compared to when it launched, this has come down quite nicely. So I think that's a very solid option actually. Oh look, no, there's one here for 240 and it's in stock. Let's go for that. I mean, let's take a closer look as well. We do have 8 GB of VRAM here. Obviously, it is an RTX card, so you can access some form of ray tracing, though let's be honest, its performance is definitely going to be fairly limited. But I think it's pretty much got everything that you need, really, especially if you're just playing multiplayer titles. I think this is going to be a very solid option, and suddenly £240, I can't believe I'm saying this, for a graphics card, is very, very affordable. But of course, we will need a motherboard to go with this, and we will need to go Intel, as we've got an Intel CPU. We can go for B660, we don't need to go for the current gen, and it doesn't even need to have USB BIOS flashing if we're buying a 12th gen, but obviously if you're going for 13th, you need to make sure that you get one that does. Let's have a look. We've got a Pro B660M, 114 GB. I've used this one actually before on the channel, 120.99. That MSI one looks very, very bare bones, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not saying the Gigabyte is particularly better equipped, but I have at least used this one before. So I'm going to go with this. In terms of cooling, by the way, it should be noted that if you buy one of Intel's more budget-friendly non-K CPUs, you do get a cooler in the box. And it's definitely not the best. I definitely prefer the Ryzen stock cooler, but for an i3, it's going to be good enough. And obviously, this is a budget-friendly rig. It comes free, so just upgrade it when you have the budget to do it. I wouldn't worry too much about it at launch unless you're dead set on having a quieter PC. That you probably should be, but there are other priorities. We will, of course, also need a chassis, and I had some people actually say in the previous video, what's a chassis? How do you want me to say it? Chassis? Chassis. Is that better? Is that what you want? We're not actually going for micro ATX here today, we're going for full size, so you need to find yourself an ATX sized enclosure. That one actually looks okay at first glance, this Onyx, but obviously haven't used that. I used this in my previous live stream. You can find that video in the top right hand corner of your screen. You can buy that somewhere else for around about 50 or so. But this one has very good reviews actually, which is nice, and it's £50, tempered glass, 3 USBs on the front, which is actually quite useful because a lot of people just use these for receivers. So let's give this a go. But obviously with all of these rigs, I haven't actually built the exact part list that we're going to go with, so obviously bear this in mind when doing your final selection. We're also going to need some RAM and storage, and we're going for DDR4 here, and this is why I'm very keen to go for Intel over AMD, because we want that slightly better longevity, but then also support for DDR4, not the more expensive DDR5. So look at 3200 megahertz. Wow, is that really the case? That is good. We've got to go with that. 3200 megahertz, 16 gig of RAM, 4168. There is definitely some good news in PC gaming right now. We'll of course also need some storage, and there's no need to go for Gen 4 unless you can get a really good deal. I would say 1 terabyte or maybe 500 gig is going to be fine. SN350, like $77.99 for a terabyte, that's pretty good. Or there's one here like from Patriot, $64.98. 1 terabytes of storage. Definitely not the fastest, but for a budget-friendly gaming PC, I still don't think you're going to notice that much difference. I think you're going to notice 1 terabyte of storage more, so we're going to go with that. It's me! That wasn't even done. This was a sponsored thing we actually did with eBuyer earlier in the year. If you haven't watched it, do go watch it. I'm great in it, obviously, the great PC build-off. This sounds like a massive ad and sponsored thing. I promise it's not. I just get around, clearly. I mean, you can tell it's me because my dress sense isn't great where I've got this bit of shirt sticking out down the bottom. Anyway, what was I saying? Power supplies. Let's go with power supplies. And I want to make sure that I've got something that has plenty of upgradability. And there is actually a very good offer at the moment on a 550 watt from Corsair. This is a TX-M. And this is going to be perfect for what we're doing now, but it should be noted if you want to upgrade to something like an RTX 3060 or 3060 Ti a little bit later, then having a 600 or 650 watt power supply might make that a little bit easier. Nvidia recommend, I think it's 600 for a 3060. So bear that in mind, but if you can get hold of this, but maybe the 650 watt version, it's probably what I would do, but if you're trying to save some money, 550 watts should be more than good enough. So let's have a look then. What do we have in our basket? We've got our i3, our 3050, motherboard, RAM, SSD, power supply, case. And actually that comes out to £686 including delivery, which I think is very good. And this is still a PC that's going to be able to play 1080p, pretty much high settings across the board. Obviously it is going to depend on the game. We know the ray tracing isn't going to be the best, but I suppose it's nice to have the option, even if it's just for showing what your PC can technically do. But I think you'd be really happy with this. And I do actually want to get hold of one of these 3050s with this i3, because I think this would be a great PC to build on the channel. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see that. Oh, wait a minute, there's one component we still need to add that's going to make all of the difference. It is the PC Centric mouse mat, available from pccentric.store. Not just in dollars, by the way, it's in loads of different currencies for anyone asking. Here it is, look, in all of its glory. There's under 300 units of this left, and then there will never be any more made. Check it out with the link down below. Get in that exclusive club, baby. But now it is time for our mid-range build, and this is definitely where the party gets started, and I'm going to get started, this time in Newegg, because it's not fair that all of the US people miss out on the pricing. And I actually want to start with my favorite graphics card, the RTX 3060 Ti, and this is pretty much as mid-range as it gets, and it's still my favorite graphics card really that's on the market today, purely because I don't think anyone necessarily needs more performance than this unless you're playing at a specific resolution that's, I don't know, pretty high. Because it ticks all of the boxes, right? It supports Nvidia's DLSS, you've got plenty of frame rate in multiplayer titles, even at 1440p, and it doesn't require a stupidly high-end CPU to properly achieve those frame rates. Obviously you can go higher end, and if you want to do that, that's fantastic, but I think this is pretty much the sweet spot for most people. Should be noted as well that AMD offerings are available as well. If you can get a really good deal, I would go for that, but especially at the mid-range, I think DLSS is a really nice thing to have, which is why we're going to stick with this. In terms of pricing, what do we have? The cheapest one is from Pelland. I've never actually heard of them before. $389. There's a Zotac one here for $420. I've used that though, it was a little bit louder than I'd like. I mean, it's got the same Nvidia GPU, so it can't be drastically different. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen a GPU from Pelland before, or whether you've got this exact one. It's pretty cool actually. We're going to use this to save money, but it should be noted I haven't used this exact one, and if it's louder, I'm sorry. It should also be noted, by the way, that you can get a 3070 for $479, and I believe this one is in stock. So while the 40 series might be a little bit disappointing when it comes to price point, at least the previous generation is coming down and it is in stock. I think our next component is going to be the CPU, and obviously you have Intel and AMD, and I think there are two very clear, I guess, winners really when it comes to options at the moment for gaming CPUs. Both of them have just been released actually, and the first one is from AMD. You can go for the non-X version of the 7600 or the 7700, or if you're going for Intel, they have literally just released the 13400F. And both of them are going to be perfect for gaming because the price point is pretty much come down as low as it possibly can while still maintaining very high performance. Yes, obviously more expensive CPUs will have more performance, but as discussed, unless you're using a really high-end GPU, it's not really something you'll be able to tap into anyway, unless you're doing some form of productivity or streaming on the side as well. But if possible, I want to go for Ryzen. Here we have a Ryzen 7600X. This is $280 almost, but I want the non-X version. I'm not sure if Newegg have it on the site yet, which is a bit annoying. I mean, do they have the 13400F? They do. Here's the thing. Ow! I knew that was going to happen. Here's the thing, right? It is going to be a pretty tricky decision between these two. I will be doing this the next video I make, so get subscribed to actually see these two things head to head, because they're both brilliant offerings, but this at the moment has a little bit of a flaw that is almost ahead of its time because it's currently using DDR5 memory only, whereas this is DDR4 or DDR5. So you can pretty much put this in a cheaper motherboard, grab some cheaper memory, and probably maintain the same amount of gaming performance. We'll be putting this to the test, but I do think that Intel is probably slightly better value, despite the fact that this chip may actually be a fair bit cheaper when it comes to checkout. So let's go with Intel once again. 13400F has been added. And then of course we are also going to need a motherboard. So we go Intel motherboards. We once again look at B660. I don't think there's really any point buying 7 series unless you want that compatibility without doing a BIOS update, which I understand, depends on price, but that's what I would do anyway. And let's have a look. We have a B660 Aorus Master for $160. That is a very good deal. That is a very good deal. Yeah, see, the rest of them are a fair bit more expensive. I want to go for something mid-range. I mean, something like the Steel Legend would have actually been a really good option, but it makes sense to go for something that's on sale if it is a legitimate sale. The main thing to note, and that it absolutely must have if you're going to be copying this video, is that it does have some form of USB flashing without actually having an older CPU, because obviously you won't have one. So here we're going to go with this Q-Flash Plus on this Gigabyte B660 Aorus Master DDR4. And Newegg are actually suggesting a case for us here, which is interesting because it is a white GPU, so that would probably look quite nice in a white case. But as the motherboard itself is black, I'm not sure whether that's going to work, but it's definitely a good option. The Meshify C, I've used this before, I did like it. Shouldn't really have too much issue with cooling or anything. Not sure there's a better deal though. $100 is still a fair amount. 4000D look, $94.99. As you'd expect, there definitely are quite a lot of options. There's this Fantex Eclipse here. I haven't actually used this one, the 360, and it's got this little strip down the side. It looks pretty darn tasty. It's definitely a great looking case. I mean, you get 3 RGB fans as standard on the front, and the Fantex ones aren't bad actually. You can get a 360 radiator at the top, which I think is really important for GPU thermals, as if you put it at the front, it can be a little bit too loud for my liking, and generally Fantex cases are just pretty easy to build in, and there's plenty of room for larger size graphics cards as well. So I think we're going to go with this, the G360 for $90. We're also going to need some DDR4 memory, and I'm going to go for something that's a little bit more attractive. And here we have a very good deal on some Trident Z RGB, 3600 megahertz, and you can see it's currently at $67.99. Makes perfect sense to me. As for SSD storage, we are going for Gen 4 as the price has come down, but we're not going to go for a super high-end one. Here we've got a P5 Plus for $99, 1 terabyte in size. Can anything come close to that? Yes, actually you've got loads of options. You've got this sale on at the moment for $99.99 on an SN850X from WD Black. That is going to be very, very fast. Or you can save yourself $10 and go for the next one down, but I think that's the way I would go. It's mad actually, you've got so many good options. I think the cheapest one is this one here from Crucial, $79.99, 1 terabyte Gen 4, but it is very tempting to go for something a little bit higher end. We go for the WD as it's ever so slightly faster, or at least according to the specs, but I really don't think you have any issue choosing an SSD at all. In terms of cooling, I've actually already got my eyes on one I've used loads of times before. This is the Arctic Freezer i35. It's a really nice size, it should fit in most size chassis, and it's very quiet. You don't really need anything more than this. Obviously, if you're grabbing like an i7 or an i9, this isn't going to be the best. So if you're going to upgrade your CPU at a later date, maybe get something more expensive. But for the i5 that we're using, I think this is going to be perfect. It's going to be better than the one that comes in the box, and it will look a whole lot better to boot too. So let's add this to our cart. And then once again, I think we find ourselves just in the need of a power supply. And again, I'm going to go for 650 or 750. There's some good offers here at the moment. Both of these would be good options. These seem to come up a lot in these videos, but you can see why, because the price is always pretty enticing, and it's still 80+ gold rated, and it's fully modular, so you don't really need too much more than this. What's the difference in price between the 650? Quite a lot, so we're going to stick with the 650, but if you do want to upgrade to something like an RTX 3080, 750 is clearly going to be the way to go. Skipping to the important bit, the pricing, we have a dollar amount of $1,152, which is very enticing. Bear in mind that a couple of years ago, that'll probably be what? Double the price. So everything has been coming down, and especially with that 13th gen CPU, I think this is going to be a very good system for years to come. I wouldn't be worried about the lack of DDR5, but if that does bother you, then just go for Ryzen, because I think their CPUs are very good value. But all round, I have to say I'm very impressed. Let's move on to the final rig, the high-end beast. And this beastly build is going to be built at Scan, as this is where I actually got my first ever PC components from. How about that? That's going back a bit now. But I think we're going to go for AMD, and we're going to go for an RX 7900 XTX. Obviously, you can go for a 4080 and 4090, but that's in the realms of, like, I don't know, what's bigger than Beast? Behemoth! We'll save that for another time. I mean, are any actually in stock at all? No. Does Anywhere have them? CCL Computers has a TUF for 1049. Let's go with that. I mean, to be fair, this is a card I can actually vouch for, because here it is, in the flesh. It's a little bit overbuilt. I mean, it's very overbuilt, but if you can get it for a decent enough price, which to be fair, 1,050 I'd say is fair, is going to serve you well. We get a free SSD with it, 240 gig. Yay. For our CPU, I do want to go with AMD, and I'm going to add this 7900X to our basket, but I should note, really, that I think most gamers will probably want to go for either the 3D version of this, or the now cheaper non-X version, and then like do some auto overclocking in your motherboards, because you'll get very similar results at a lower power draw and pretty much the same levels of performance, which is pretty cool. But the 7900X is a brilliant CPU, and if you can get that cheap, that's definitely worth going for as well. As for motherboards, we will of course need to go for AM5, and we're going to go high-end, so we will go for X670. And prices have definitely started to come down a little bit, which is nice. I mean, here you can get this Prime X670p for 252, which is pretty cool. The E version is about £100 more. I mean, all of the really cool gaming ones are extreme, and they're just silly money. I mean, you don't need these, you just don't. 422 is probably the best you're going to get. Oh, no, there we go. Okay, this is okay. The TUF £344 gaming X670E. Actually, that is a board I'd probably buy. We'll add that to our basket. Let's have a look at our memory. We need some DDR5. Is there anything that's optimized for AMD? Some Expo, maybe? Yes, there we go. 24 kits. 2x16. If you don't want RGB, that's definitely a good offer. But this is a beastly rig, so I think we need to go with the RGB beast. 5600 megahertz is absolutely fine, by the way. If you want to learn more about DDR4 versus DDR5 and the difference capacity and speed makes, you can find that video in the top right corner of your screen. The results were genuinely very surprising. We will of course also need some cooling, and you don't need to go for an absolutely gigantic one if you're going to go for a non-X version. But I've actually been using mine with an H150i. I think this is a very good option actually. It doesn't have RGB fans, but £141, it pretty much ticks all of the boxes really. So we're going to go with that as well. SSD, anything super fast, Gen 4 is going to be absolutely fine. I mean, here we have the KC3000 for £90. I think that's going to be all anyone needs really. Yeah, we're going to go with the Kingston. I've used that quite a few times and it's great. Then of course, we will also need to be choosing somewhere to actually house all of these components with our PC case. And I want to see if I can get one of my favorites. And the one I'm looking for is the O11 Evo, because this is my favorite chassis. This is the slightly older version. I'm not sure if they actually have the Evo on CCL, but I'll leave some links if you want to check it out from a different site. LANCool 3 is also very good. I have actually used this before, the O11 Air. This is a little bit cheaper. You will have to add your own fans. This is actually the one that I built in with the PC Build Challenge that I will actually leave link below. Again, not an ad, but I really liked this. So I think this is going to be a very good option for our rig. If you want to spend more, go for the Evo. I think it is better looking, but this is more mesh, which a lot of people love because you get better airflow. We will of course also need to add some fans, and there are quite a few different options to go with. I really like ones from Corsair, Be Quiet, but actually the ones from Lee I think are so good because they're very easy to actually get installed with their sort of locking connector. I mean, here you go, look, you've got the AL120s, £83.52. I'll just see if the other ones are available as well. SL120 V2. Let's go with these. £87, 3 should be fine, but obviously you can add loads more if you want. Maybe 4 is optimal because you can have one at the back, 3 at the front. And then I think the final component for this rig is the power supply, and 1000 watts is what I'd want to go with just to have a little bit more wiggle room, shall we say. You've got the RM1000E and then the RM1000X. I assume the E is slightly newer actually. It probably makes sense to go with that one. £154.99. It's going to have loads of juice. It's rated gold for efficiency, so it should be better on your energy bills, though any high-end graphics card isn't exactly going to help. But I do like the fact that because it's fully modular, you can swap out the cables for something that looks a whole lot better, especially if you are going for the latest Nvidia cards when you need something that isn't like this horrible adapter that will look a mess. We're going to add this to our basket. And with that, I think that actually brings our basket to a close. Do we have everything? We've got the all-important 240 gig SSD that they want to get rid of. And I think we have everything else. And the total cost is no less than £2,793. So we are definitely talking big money. But when you think 1,050 of that is actually from the graphics card, obviously it puts our PC gaming hobby into perspective. If you can use your PC for productivity as well, obviously fantastic, it's going to bring the price down, I suppose. But realistically, if you do want to buy a top-end gaming PC, this is pretty much more than anyone really ever needs. Even if you're playing at 4K, the only limitation really with the AMD cards is that the ray tracing isn't quite as good as you find on Nvidia, and you don't have DLSS 3, though their competitor is coming. But especially at the moment, bearing in mind that there aren't really that many games that actually support DLSS 3, I don't think that's a huge deal. But I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of all of these components and these rigs? Have I got it right? Have I got it wrong? If you do want to check out current pricing on any of them featured, you can find them linked down below, alongside all of the other previous builds that I've done that will have slightly different price points. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed, and of course, grab yourself a PC Centric mouse mat down in the description down below. And while you're down there, why not grab the brand new Elgato Stream Deck Plus? This awesome gadget makes your life so much easier, with customizable controls for pretty much any aspect of your gaming setup. I use mine to control Philips Hue, Nanoleaf, Elgato Studio Lights, PC lighting, and much, much more. Learn what you can do with the Stream Deck Plus today with the link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one.